Look at all these Spring vulnerabilities.
What version of Spring should we recommend to the devs?
We can tell the devs to use Spring Framework version 5.3.26
or Spring Boot version 3.0.1.
Once again, InfoSec just doesn't get it, but it does sound like a good video topic. To understand Spring, we have to travel back in time to the turn of the century, back to 1999 when the original J2EE specification was announced. One of the big ideas of the spec was to have features and capabilities built into the runtime environment that could be requested and used on demand. This included services like persistence, transaction support, resource pooling for database connections, and message queues. Writing enterprise applications was difficult and required lots of complicated XML and supporting code that was complex to write and maintain, and the runtime performance was often lacking. To get applications to run using these services required a heavyweight and expensive environment called an application server to provide all of these features, including EJBs, JMS, JTA, and so on. They're very costly, so not every company could afford them. Back then, free open-source versions of similar tools were rare. Rod Johnson published a book in 2004 called J2EE Development Without EJB, which put forth the idea that the same services provided by an application server could be written using plain old Java objects and run in a simpler environment without the need for a full-featured application server. The idea caught on, and the popularity of the Spring Framework took off. The Spring Framework provides the capabilities necessary to build an enterprise application without all the overhead and expense of an application server. The Spring Framework allowed you as a developer to use services on demand without the need to instantiate those services or create a lot of bloated, complex code to support remote dependencies or look them up in a registry. However, as the Spring Framework became more and more successful, the libraries grew in size and complexity. It became more difficult to create an application from scratch due to the amount of configuration that was necessary to make your application work. In 2014, about 10 years after the Spring Framework was introduced, the first version of Spring Boot was released. Spring Boot focused on convention over configuration, making it easy to create a Spring application that was already pre-configured with reasonable defaults, so your application would just run. The need for complex configuration at the start was eliminated. By the time Spring Boot came around, build automation tools such as Maven and Gradle were commonplace. This provided support for another major innovation introduced with Spring Boot, starter packages. Starter packages are collections of dependencies that are tested and known to work with one another and provide services such as the creation of RESTful web services, robust application security, or providing access to a variety of data stores such as SQL and NoSQL databases. No longer did developers have to struggle to find compatible versions of libraries that would work with one another without conflicts or errors. It's important to know that Spring Framework and all the associated libraries are the plumbing that underpins Spring Boot. However, for new development, using Spring Boot is the recommended solution, while using Spring Framework directly is primarily for older legacy applications that were created before the existence of Spring Boot. When the tools are released, Spring Framework comes first, and Spring Boot usually follows within a week or so afterwards. Let's talk about Spring Boot, Spring Framework, and the Java version requirements. First, you should know that the long-term support versions of Java are 8, 11, 17, and in September 2023, version 21. It can be confusing when discussing version compatibility with Spring Framework and Spring Boot. A few general guidelines will help keep you and your well-intentioned information security team on the right path when recommending new versions of Spring. Currently, Spring Boot 3 requires Spring Framework 6, and they both require Java 17 or later. Requiring Java 17 is a significant change for many organizations. According to the 2023 Java Developer Productivity Report from JRebel, 31% of organizations are still using Java 8, 28% are still on Java 11, while only 25% are using Java 17 or newer. So recommending or requiring a move to Spring Boot 3 or greater comes with a lot of additional work that many organizations aren't yet ready to take on. If your organization is still using Java 8 or Java 11, Spring Framework version 5.3.6 or version 2.7 of Spring Boot will work for you. Because these tools are so widely used and so important in so many organizations, development teams, as well as information security teams, owe it to themselves to stay informed on the changes to Spring Boot and the Spring Framework, the runtime requirements, and the state of the vulnerabilities and patches to help keep their applications secure. Thanks for watching, and remember to always begin secure.